Welcome to the Way of the Spiritual Path. My name is Ursula and our guest today is Clarice Belcher. We are going to be talking about the Way of the Spiritual Path and communication. When we come from a place of compassion, which is our natural state, then we can communicate our thoughts, our feelings, our needs from a better place. The work I do is subconscious work, so this is very related to that work. When we understand which part we're speaking from, then we can put ourselves in the proper order. If our angry part is talking, of course, we're not going to get the results that we need. When our compassionate, vulnerable part is talking, then we can have a clearer communication. Understanding our parts and where we speak from is a part of the work that I do. So in the nonviolent communication work of Marshall Rosenberg, is to understand that we naturally have a way of being, but when life hits us, as far as my work goes, we turn into these roles and parts. So we may speak defensively, or we may speak aggressively, or we may come from a place of hurt, so we are always on guard. We may speak from a place of blame. And of course, nothing's ever going to come across. If I'm volleying blame to somebody and hate to somebody, they're not going to respond in a way that my compassionate side wants, or my place of feelings wants. So there's many complications within. Before we even open our mouth, there's so many parts running around. When I work with my clients, it's to understand those parts, where we're coming from, and to calm the angry, mean ones down. So we're going to really dive deep and understand something quite beautiful. Clarice is a teacher, a facilitator of this nonviolent communication, learning how to slow down and come from a place of compassion and love, stating our needs and feelings. I've been taking classes with Clarice for 2 years, and my whole sense of reality has basically changed by the way you interact with me, and by the way you teach me, and by the way you help me slow down and check, in my language, which part am I speaking from. And this nonviolent communication, this language of compassion, makes it safer to feel my feelings when I'm trying to communicate something. So this is Clarice, and I was wanting to explore the language of compassion. What does that even mean?
Oh, well, thank you, Ursula. It's interesting. Marshall Rosenberg's central belief in all of his work was that we are compassionate beings, as you said. And for Marshall, compassion is really the flow of energy from one heart to another. So I do something because I want to do it, not because I think I have to do it. He believed that all of us at heart are compassionate beings. Despite what we see, despite what we read in newspapers or hear on radios, that all of us are compassionate. So he got really curious. What is it that helps some people stay connected to their compassion in difficult circumstances? And what is it that makes it difficult for other people to stay connected? And the one thing he realized, it was language. For him, language was crucial. How I think about a thing, how I speak about a thing will determine the extent to which I remain compassionate.
So if between my thoughts and feelings, the tool that I can stay connected to that is what comes out of my mouth, my languaging.
What comes out of your mouth, and also, even before then, what you're thinking in your mind.
Okay.
And many of us, unfortunately, have been taught ways to stay disconnected from our compassion.
It's never safe, I think, for the most part.
Often we're educated to speak in a way that Marshall thought of as life alienating.
And talk to me about that, because that's a weird phrase in the normal day-to-day world.
Yes, it is. Well, life alienating is a synonym, I suppose, for violence. And a lot of people tend to think, well, I'm not violent. I don't scream. I don't yell. I don't curse. But that's not necessarily the only forms of violence. In fact, I wonder if we might show your viewers what life alienating or violent communication looks like.
Yes. Okay. Ken, are you ready to come on board? He's been waiting patiently here in the background, peeking over the table's edge. And here's Barbie, and I'm being Barbie.
So One of the things that Marshall did, I think perhaps to ease the tensions around life alienating communication, was to have fun with that. And he decided to use animals to denote these things. So he decided on the jackal to depict life alienating communication. So he would often say we may listen with jackal ears or we may speak with jackal voice. So we're going to put the jackal here on the table because we're about to go into a life alienating communication.
Okay, so, and jackal, what I know to say jackal because it sounds like another bad word.
It does, doesn't it? Yes.
So when I'm being a jackal, I can say, oh, that's not okay.
Well, you know that you're going into a life alienating communication and that you risk not being in a compassionate place, and that will affect how you hear what others say. It will affect how you hear yourself.
So I can not only speak from a jackal point of view, I can also listen from a jackal point of view.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And researching how he works with the jackal and the giraffe, which is the compassionate place, there's videos that you can watch on YouTube. You can look him up, Marshall Rosenberg, and watch the little videos of jackal and giraffe communications.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
So, here we are. You never take me to dinner.
What do you mean I never take you to dinner? I took you to dinner last night.
Well, we always go to that same place, and it's not very romantic, and, you know, I think, like, you just don't even listen to me and my needs.
Well, what do you mean? I thought you liked going to that place last night. We go there all the time.
I know, that's the point. We go there all the time. It's not like going out anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what is the problem with that?
Well, I just want you to take me out to nice places. I mean, we always go to that same old, and it doesn't, and you talk about your work all the time.
Oh, really? Oh, so it's about the work. Well, let me tell you something. It is the money I make from work that pay for all the dinners out.
See, you're just not listening to me.
Well, you know what? Fred takes Alice out to dinner. Maybe it's just too bad that he didn't marry you, or he could take you out to nice dinners.
He does take her out to dinners, and I don't want to marry him.
So we'll cut, because that's probably more than enough jackal than anyone really wants to hear in one day. But we just thought it would be fun to have this kind of dialogue so that you can hear the ways in which life alienating communication occurs. There's a lot of shame in this dialogue. There's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of put downs. There's a lot of comparisons. But the thing that's most interesting about this is that neither Ken nor Barbie ever discuss what is real and what is alive for them in their hearts. So Ken may very well take Barbie out to dinner, but will he want to do it again and again if Barbie keeps showing up this way? And at what cost is it to Barbie for her to have Ken take her to dinner?
She's not clear about what she's trying to say.
And neither is he. Neither one of them are explicit about what is important to them. And so that's part of life alienating communication. In fact, each of these have alienated themselves from what is alive and real in them. So one might think, well, gosh, how do I speak my truth in ways that others can really hear? And so it seems to me that the way Marshall thought about it is a very useful strategy.
And he broke it down into 4 simple steps.
Yes, he did.
Can you cover those?
Absolutely. So I think of them as the 4 components of language of compassion. The first one, observe without evaluation.
Now that evaluation thing, that gets me every time.
Well, the moment that Barbie said to Ken, "You never take me out to dinner,"
It was false.
Well, it's an evaluation, isn't it? And so to be able to observe without evaluation is to be a little bit like Dragnet, if anyone remembers that show.
Describe it for the
facts.
viewers.
It's just
and listen, just the facts, ma'am.
Just the facts.
That's where
yes.
that line came from.
Absolutely. And that's what observation without evaluation is, because you can see the moment that Barbie says, "You never take me out to dinner," what is happening to Ken? He's just already beginning to turn away. Can I turn his little head down? He'd be sad to hear that,
Yeah.
but he may not necessarily be connected to that sadness because his defenses have risen.
Right. So then you have so his sad rhino comes in And he's hanging out with him as far as an emotion goes.
But he may be covering that sadness with anger.
So his angry part, the lion, is like, what do you mean I never take you to
Right.
dinner?
Yes, because the
Alice.
lion is going to protect the sad part, because in this moment he's uncomfortable sharing what he really believes.
Right, and maybe she feels neglected. Let's say she feels neglected back here, the hippo. So she comes in accusing and blaming him of not being cognizant of her sadness of whatever she's sad about. She's not delivering "I'm sad" at all in her "you don't take me to dinner"
So
conversation.
you're leading us beautifully into step 2, share feelings.
Which is a scary thing.
Well, it is a scary thing, especially if you're not real clear what a feeling is. A lot of times someone might say,
That'd be me for the first whole year.
Yeah.
Clarice would say, that's not a feeling, Ursula. And I'd be like, that's not a feeling. I'm feeling that feeling. But really what I discovered in my process of this work is there are thoughts and conditions and scenarios that I think are a feeling, because I'm assuming or I'm referring to the past all the time, of times and places where it wasn't safe for me to feel my feelings, and it wasn't safe for me to talk about my feelings because I would get shut down on the life alienated. Mm-hmm. So instead of moving forward with a vulnerable part and to be set up for the attack, basically, without any kind of defenses, why bother? Why bother feeling that? Because it would push me into a place of closure, no escape, like I'm stuck here. So any kind of ability to say, hey, I'm trying to say something, hey, is actually a cry for help, a cry for connection. But we, of course, don't hear it that way. We hear it from defensiveness.
Well, especially if I'm in a jackal place.
Yes.
Then I will not be able to hear your pain. And so, yes, I think you bring in a beautiful point that often we might use the phrase, I feel, I might feel that you're unfair.
Right.
So I've said the words I feel, but in that statement, there is no feeling that is actually named. I might feel angry because that was unfair. I might feel disappointed because that was unfair. That is naming the feelings. That's making it explicit and offering information not just for me as one who's feeling that, but sharing it with you so that you have a clear idea about what's alive in me in the moment.
And where you're really coming from.
And feelings are nothing more really than body reactions to an observation. But feelings aren't like up here and disconnected. I don't have a feeling of anger that suddenly happens. What Marshall believed, and this leads us into step 3, stating needs, is that all feelings are in the service of needs. So there are 2 kinds of needs, there are 2 kinds of feelings. One for when needs are met, so that might be happiness, satisfaction, joy, exhilaration, exuberance. And then there is a whole set of feelings for when needs are not being met: sadness, frustration, anxiety, worry. And so a need then is nothing more than the quality of life that sustains a life I cherish. That's what a need is. And it's a very different way of thinking about it. If you take a look at your dictionary, sometimes the definition can be so confusing it's hard to understand it. But actually, a need is nothing more than qualities that sustain a life worth living that I cherish. And when I was growing up, I was taught I only had 3 needs: food, air, and water. That was it. But there are so many more. The need to be connected, the need to trust, the need to be heard.
To be heard is a really big one.
Oh,
yes.
Absolutely. The need to love, the need to have community, to belong. So when we are not clear about what our needs are and then are unable to share it, then that's just another piece of alienation that comes into the relationship.
So this is very multi-level. Not only do we not have a clue of what we're actually feeling, because when we're in blame or accusation or defensiveness, we're not connecting with our feelings of anger, feeling See, I'm afraid to name feelings so abandonment is an evaluation.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful piece. A lot of people will say that. I feel abandoned. I feel manipulated. I feel taken granted of. Well, that's not a feeling. That's an interpretation. And that's an important distinction, because if I sit here and say to myself, I feel manipulated, then I'm going to work myself up into an anger without really being clear what that's all about.
So if the idea of abandonment comes up, what's the feeling under abandonment?
Yes, and so in this case it might be fear. I'm scared, and then with the speed of light, I mean, those were Marshall's very words, with the speed of light, connect that fear to a need. So if I'm holding an idea that I'm abandoned and I feel frightened by that, then what is my need? And perhaps I have a need for community. Perhaps I have a need for connection. Perhaps I have a need for belonging. And the mere process of naming those feelings and naming the needs and sitting with them will help me transcend the wrongdoing. So rather than pointing a finger at you and say, you abandoned me, how could you possibly do that? If I can instead get connected, wow, I'm feeling something really strong here. Oh, it looks like anger, but I think it's fear. And I think it's fear, I think I'm frightened.
Because my need to connect is not
Isn't being
there.
met. So then that leads us into step 4, making a specific request. So if I'm that clear that I am feeling fear because I have a need to connect, then what would my specific strategy be? And for Marshall, that would be naming a specific behavior and time. So it might be, well, perhaps I would like to have a 20-minute conversation with Ursula sometime today, maybe at 5 o'clock. So I might ask you, would you be willing to have a conversation with me about 20 minutes, 5 o'clock today? That makes it really clear what I would like it to be. It makes it really clear for what Ursula knows is important to me, and then she can make her decision, yes or no. She might say, I'd love to do the 20-minute conversation. 5 o'clock doesn't work, I'm busy. Could we do it at 8? Or she might say, well, if we have the conversation now, I can give you 15 minutes for sure. The rest of my day is busy. But having that kind of specificity and clarity is so helpful.
So using the 4 steps, Barbie can say, if she's understanding, so we talked about abandonment, let's say in relationships, as many of us know, connection is vital. If we don't feel connected to our partner, like, what's it all about anyway? And many times in today's world, we're so distracted, we're so busy, we're so pulled in many directions that we abandon our own needs and wants for the sake of doing and being and performing. So if she could get into her sad feeling about really feeling disconnected or not having her sense of connection, her need met. So if she could say, instead of accusing him, she could be in touch with her sadness and her need to connect and say, sweetheart, Ken, my dear, so then now he doesn't have to be defensive or confused or all of his reactions. And she could say, Ken, so the first step is state the need with us.
Well, the first step would be
observation.
observation. So would you want to go back to the
Yes.
conversation they had about dinner? You never take me out to dinner?
Right.
So what do you suppose? Well, we know what the observation is. That's usually about context. So the context here is about never going out to dinner. But what would the never piece be? Would it be we haven't gone out for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks? See, that helps make it clear for Ken what is in Barbie's mind.
Well, see, they do go to dinner because he just said they go to dinner. So I think her issue really is, sweetheart, when we go to dinner, I'm observing we spend a lot of our time talking about work.
Okay, beautiful.
And he'll go, yeah, honey, that's what we talk about.
Well, he could, unless she comes back and say, when I'm aware that we spend 40% of our conversation at dinner about work, I feel, how do you suppose she
sad.
feels? Okay, because my need for
Connection is very important.
okay.
Next
Beautiful.
time we go to dinner,
Then the 5 magic words
Would you be willing?
You got it.
Would you be willing? Because you're not demanding. You don't have any other parts coming in like, you know, me, I'm saying this and I want this. No, we give them a choice, like you said, for the time. Would you be willing to be conscious with me? Or would you be willing to, because you leave it up to him, right?
Well,
would
actually, you want to make it specific to behavior and time. So what is it that Barbie might want specifically for Ken? So it might be, so would you be willing to withhold conversation about work for the time that we're in a restaurant?
Okay. Because I have a need for connection.
Well, you've already stated that. So that's useful for him because now he has an idea what the context is, how you feel about it, what your needs are, and what your specific request is. This may come as a surprise to him.
Yes, usually.
It may not.
Yeah. Well,
we don't know. But if we have the jackal ears, then we know it's going to go down to the path of wrongdoing,
and all
shame.
these parts come
right.
out.
But if she's showing up using the language of compassion, she increases her chances to be heard in the way she wants Ken to hear her. And if she can remove the anger and the blame and the wrongdoing, then Ken might be inclined to say, wow, I never knew you felt that way. I'm really surprised. Yes, work is very important to me, and so are you. I'd be willing to try it. It might be a little scary for me, but because work is my life, but I'd be willing to try it.
So to wrap up, we're understanding that compassion is our true nature. I know we're not really in touch with it on a regular basis in our society and our way of being, because we're really, when we come from these defensive and offensive places, we're not on our path. We're not living from our spiritual path. When we learn this language of compassion, we can step back and be on our path, be coming from a true place, a place that I want to be compassionate and I want you to be compassionate with me, and I want to create a safe space for both of us to be compassionate and go on an exploration of what does that look like together instead of these tit for tat, bickering, role-playing, power over struggles that we usually go through in a day-to-day process. It is really rearranging the way society connects and communicates by learning this language of compassion.
And it also provides a life worth living.
A life worth living. So thank you so much for joining us.
So thank you, Ursula.
We have a second episode where we really break down the 4 steps and where it's coming from. So please tune in for that show as well. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ursula Lentini. You are on the Lighter Side Network. This is our guest, Clarice Belcher. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.